Hi, I'm Ben Grimley, creator of the Speak Agent Math Plus Language and Science Plus Language programs. Today, I'd like to offer you an exclusive preview of a new program that we are prototyping today that will be ready for next school year. It's a program for newcomer English learners, mainly in grades 7 to 10, with a focus on students who are at the WIDA levels 1 and 2, or equivalent levels for ELPA 21, TELPAS, and other standards. We know that these students experience significant challenges when they're trying to encounter math and science texts, word problems, experiments, etc., other content that's on grade level. And the reason for this is, of course, the language barriers, the lack of vocabulary, but also often interrupted education, which leads to a lack of prior knowledge, general background knowledge, but also prior knowledge from previous school years that they may have missed or may have had different curricula and not have had the kind of precursor content knowledge they need to access the grade level content. And so how do we deal with this? We're providing a program that spirals. Unlike the current Math Plus Language and Science Plus Language programs, we're going to break the newcomer program down into 3 levels within each lesson. The first level provides basic vocabulary and language introduction and visual representations, speaking and morphology practice, other foundational skills that will allow students to access the keywords they need, the key concepts and the related vocabulary. The second part of the lesson, which it gets assigned to students separately from the first part when they're ready, starts to provide context and background knowledge so they understand how some of the things work and operate. I'll give some examples in my demo shortly. And the third stage or third part of the third lesson in the series is really around the content knowledge. And that's where they get up to a sheltered version of what mainstream students would experience. So that first piece is really vocabulary and independent practice. The second piece, they're experiencing some texts at a first and second grade reading level, but with the age appropriateness and the content knowledge that they're going to be learning at the 7th to 10th grade level. And the third part of the lesson, they're experiencing texts at a 3rd to 4th grade level with the full set of key concepts and vocabulary, the same level of rigor and complete content knowledge. So this process makes it a lot more accessible for newcomer English language learners, and that is our goal. We want to see them achieving results that are on par with all of their classmates, so they can get those course credits, they can pass those courses, and they can graduate on time. So we are with you in working hard to achieve those goals. This prototype is just a prototype, but it should give you a sense of where we're going and some idea of what a typical Speak Agent newcomer lesson will look like for this back to school season. Okay, welcome to our demo lesson. This demo lesson spirals in 3 levels. The first level, which I'm calling Unit 2A, is really one where we introduce the key vocabulary and concepts, and we provide visuals to give context. We also do some foundational work on things like morphology. So let me go through a couple of these activities really quick and talk about some of the strategies. So this one is called Word Gallery, and it's basically an interactive word wall. So I can click on one of these, get some examples of what the concept is talking about. Students can do this independently. They can listen to virtually everything in Speak Agent. There's ubiquitous audio supports. And for the newcomer English learners, we're going to have to include words that may be already known by other students like substance or mass, because we can't guarantee that those newcomers were their last grade level when they should have learned those words.
Chemical reaction.
So I can listen and then I can do some verbal repetition. Chemical reaction. Chemical reaction. Chemical reaction. And I can listen to my takes. Let's say I like that one. And that's it. It goes into my portfolio. And this kind of verbal repetition really helps reduce cognitive load for students when they encounter the words. There are many other activities. I just want to show you this morphology one real quick, because the sentence parts, word part strategy is a really great one. So, when you learn how to read, you don't learn by spelling things out, you learn by chunking words. And so here we're chunking them into syllables. You can even deal with compound words. They can listen to the word first. We got chemical equation. If I get it in the wrong spot, it'll give me immediate corrective feedback. And I can kind of see how these words get put together. And that's going to help me master them. So let's go back. You can also see I've worked on some of these diagram activities. The diagrams are a way to provide visual representations with context around them. So I can see how these concepts interrelate, which are really important. So here I can see, well, the reactions are on that left side of the equation and the products on the right side. So that means the reactions are turning into the products. And I can kind of go through all the different words that are in here. I can also do some labeling. Labeling diagrams is a great strategy. So I can put these in the parts they belong, and I'll get one wrong here just so we can see what happens. It gives me some feedback. I can fix it. And off I go. Hooray. So that gives you a sense of the kinds of activities that come in this first part. Again, these are activities that are part of our platform today. What is new here is both the content, but also the pedagogy is very different. So whereas in our current world for the mainstream classes, we're building all of this as one big lesson. Here we're breaking it into 3. So we've only done the first of 3 parts, A. Now we're going to go to part B. This is where it starts to get interesting. So in part B, we actually start to put in context. We want to start using the vocabulary with some context, but we also want to communicate some background knowledge, which our newcomer English learners and SIFE students may lack. So let's take a look at this read along. This is an interactive reading activity. And in it, we're going to provide some background knowledge. We're going to talk about, this gas stove and what's going on there. You can see I've already answered these questions previously to make my demo a little easier. But the student is going to be answering these questions. The student can also be highlighting things that they think is important, that sort of thing. They can listen to parts. They can dim the screen around areas. They can change the text size, make it smaller, bigger. They can change the narration speed, all sorts of supports. But ultimately, they need to read. And what we've done to make this accessible, in addition to all these little supports, reading aids, is it's written for a 1st to 2nd grade level. It's Lexile level to really be accessible. Now, a newcomer could come in at a kindergarten level, and that's possible. But bear in mind that students can read above level. They can encounter successfully above level texts if they're given supports. And we have visual aids and other, we have narration. Everywhere there's an audio button. We're bolding the keywords. They've already encountered the keywords in part A of this 3-lesson spiral, so they're not going to be as intimidating. Presumably, they would have encountered chemical reaction about 8 or 9 times in all the different activities in the first level. So they're going to kind of have an idea of what it is, at least a picture in their heads by now. So moving on, you can kind of see how here again, providing some background knowledge. Maybe they don't know how a gas burner works. That gas comes up to the stove and it interacts with oxygen and it burns. That may not be straightforward to a newcomer English learner. So we're providing that visual, providing that background knowledge. In math, I had a very similar experience with the rain gauge, where there's an 8th grade activity and math activity, and many of the teachers couldn't get the right answer in the PD session. And this was an 8th grade math problem for their district. And what we found was many of the teachers had never seen a rain gauge and didn't know how a rain gauge worked. So if US-based teachers don't understand some of these things, just imagine the trauma that a newcomer goes through when they're trying to figure out, what are they even talking about? I don't even know how that works. So we need to do that before we move to the next stage, which is where we're getting a little more complicated and we're showing what happens in the reaction. You can't assume they know all that stuff. And now we get even more complicated. So that's the basic idea. But this is still all written. This entire story is 1st to 2nd grade reading level. We do the same thing with sentence parts. Remember in the first section, we had a word part story. Well, now we're doing the same thing with sentence parts. So I can drag things around. Whoops, I got that wrong. I can correct it. And we're making it a little story. It's a little story they can build back. And that's actually a fun little, this is actually an experiment they can do at home completely safely, of mixing vinegar, water, and baking soda. And by the way, that does not work for unclogging your drains. That's a complete urban myth. Okay, so let's go back to our unit here. We also have the same diagram. Oh, I've already done this one, so it's not going to let me because I already recorded it. But you can just record kind of free form. You can answer a free form question there for the diagram and activity. For the My Voice, I can record my answers to sentences. And now I'm graduating from isolated vocabulary to now putting into the context of sentences. So I can do the same thing where I listen and I record, and you get the idea, right? So this is the next stage of the spiral, right? 1st to 2nd grade reading level. And now we're going to go to the last stage, this part C. Now, this is open-ended, so students don't have to finish everything in those previous ones to get to the final one. Again, this is just a prototype. We haven't really built out all the content. There would be a lot more activities. They'd be a little more polished. We may even have some translation components built in. For example, translating the keywords to some languages like Spanish. However, already it works in any language that Google Translate supports. Chinese is impressive, but Spanish is probably represents about 60% of newcomers. So we'll go with Spanish. So they can already do that, and it'll already translate everything. That said, the translations are not always perfect for the keywords. So that is something that we will want to do for the newcomers, is to have cognates and keywords translated for them to make sure it's 100% accurate. So you can see at this stage, I'm going through some of the same images and this similar storyline, and we start getting more complicated though. Look at this. This is a little more complicated. This is actually written at the 3rd to 4th grade reading level, still below level. I mean, this is 9th grade level content, but we're giving it to them in accessible text with all the supports that we saw before. So that's the idea here. And then other activities we have that are on our platform, like this one called Vocab Lab, are providing additional supports. So this is making vocabulary more accessible by breaking it into parts. So here we go. We're going to look at reactants. So the carbon dioxide and the water are reactants in this particular formula, and I really want that cupcake right now. But let's break it down. So what is a reactant? It is the substances that happen before a reaction, right? Let's say we don't know what a substance is. We can actually click on that and we get some support. You can even hear the word. So let's see if that works. Oh, bang on, look at that. So I can work my way through those and save my progress and all. And then as I'm going through, it's capturing all my work. So I can see here was all the responses I made at these different levels, going back to the first level. Can see here some of the words I recorded. There's all kinds of great things that we can track in here. But the basic idea is this spiraling. That's really what I wanted to communicate. We also have writing activities that we're adding in, and that would be in the third layer in this unit 2C would be where the writing activities live. And those writing activities are scaffolded as well in 3 stages. You get sentence stems, moves up to comparing against a writing model, and then you start writing with a word bank, but no other supports. Okay, so let's take a look at the strategies we just encountered in the sample lesson. So in the first part of the lesson that we had marked as part A, we were doing mainly independent practice with vocabulary. We were providing some visual representation, in fact, multiple visuals, so that students can get various senses of what's happening. There's all kinds of audio supports and various little word games and memory games to do, and some verbal repetition and other multimodal practice. And then we had the morphology game where you had manipulating the word parts. So that's all happening in that first part. And daily review is a key part of this. Just 5 to 7 minutes a day can really improve retention. So if students are just doing a little bit each day on that for a few days, they can even come back to it while they're working on the other ones. And then they're moving up. And if they're ready to move up, they don't have to do the full part A. They can move all the way to part B at any time when they're ready. And then when they're in part B, they're dealing with more of the texts. They're, presumably when we have the tool, they're creating their own visuals to convey meaning. They're doing the interactive reading where they're responding as they go. They're making connections to the real world. They're building sentences using manipulating sentence parts and putting them together to recreate stories. They're filling in blanks, an activity I didn't share with you, but we have a sentence frames activity. And we also would use at this stage videos that would give instructional context, whether it's how to set up an experiment in science, how to solve a math problem, whatever it is, investigating phenomena. When they get to that part C, the third stage, that's where they're really analyzing vocabulary, breaking it apart, explaining their thinking with the scaffolding writing activities, doing the journals if they're in science, looking at work examples and writing and showing their STEM writing, and particularly in math. So a whole lot of different strategies broken apart to really move them up the spiral from the 1st and 2nd grade reading level to the 3rd and 4th grade reading level. They're working their way up because of these tools, because of the supports and scaffolds and the game-like quality of some of the activities. They're actually able to access text that may be above their reading level. And that's really critical because that's how they're going to move to the next reading level, is by encountering text that they can't 100% comprehend yet. And they're going to push themselves to get to that level. So just because it's for newcomers doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be weaker content or dumbed down content. It is absolutely going to be the same level of content knowledge that they're going to achieve when they get through the whole spiraled curriculum that they would if they were in a mainstream class. That is our goal. We want them to be on par with every other student in the class.